All right, folks, welcome to Nino's Corner. We just did an amazing podcast on ninoscorner.tv. I'm joined with SGAnon once again, and we're going to be talking about the Charlie Kirk assassination. SGAnon, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me back to FluffTube, Nino. Good to be here.
Folks, when you're distracted by headlines, the insiders are getting ready. Billionaires, big banks, even foreign governments are hoarding gold. They know the dollar's being devalued. They know the next crash is coming. So why don't you own what they're buying? Noble Gold Investments make it simple to protect yourself with the same investment grade gold and silver. The elites are stockpiling real assets you can hold in your hand and keep safe in your retirement account. But don't wait until it's too late. Go to noblegoldinvestments.com, noblegoldinvestments.com right now, folks, to get started on that. Now let's get back to Charlie Kirk. I'm seeing a lot of TikTok videos, Instagram videos of the left really celebrating this crushing and disturbing defeat to the right, this horrific, this event that just keeps playing over and over and over in my mind, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I think right now more than ever, my audience needs to know that, folks, they're resorting to these fear-based tactics, these fear-based tactics, these trauma-based programming events because they're losing. And I really mean that. They have to resort to these tactics because they are losing. What we all witnessed yesterday was nothing less than horrific. But, folks, I think there's an important lesson here. And I don't know how you feel about this, SG, but you can only go into a rabies-infected dog den so many times before you get bit. It's like every time I fought in a fight, the referee pulls you aside and says, hey, keep your hands high, protect yourself at all times. We need to expect this kind of retaliation and this backlash and expect to get bit if we're going into a den with rabies-infected dogs, trying to pet them and give them logic and reason. They say hell is a place absent of logic and reason. And it seems to me like these universities, these colleges are definitely a place of hell that are absent of logic and reason now. What's your thoughts, SG?
Well, it's very interesting that you should open the discussion with that, Nino, because I think it speaks to the broader issue here. And that's what a lot of commentators and, podcasts and news broadcasters and everyone out there on the information ecosystem today is really attempting to wrap their head around and crunch and understand, why did this happen? What were the causal factors? And how do we stop and arrest this trajectory of momentum here in the United States of America, right? We can remember a time when we were children that the world had its difficulties and there was tension between political, ideas and discussions. And the Thanksgiving dinner table was a little bit unpleasant sometimes when that conspiracy fringe family member was there, home for the holidays for their yearly appearance at the family dinner. But other than that, it didn't really go much further than that. You had the typical frictions that developed between growing adolescents of both genders. You had the typical frictions of certain communities and cultures here. Within the United States, we're a broad and diverse nation with those types of things. But over the last 15 to 20 years, something has clearly changed. And I would submit to folks out there that it began to change really in earnest post 9/11 2001, which happens to be very interesting considering the day we're doing this broadcast. And it became an artificially engineered situation, a situation here domestically within the common culture, within the common understanding and the popular discourse about what are acceptable and unacceptable behaviors. And when we look at what's happening right now with the circus clowns that are far to the left of center and showcasing the entirety of their rectal areas with what's happening by their reactions online, I think what we have to stop and appreciate is that these are individuals, most of them, the vast majority of them, who are around the millennial or zennial age range and who have been subjected to military-grade psychological mind control of an intense and traumatizing fashion for at least the last 25 to 30 years. And so as we look at what Charlie Kirk was doing, Charlie Kirk was unraveling that dream spell. He was removing people from that transformation, and he was doing it in the most consequential demographic to any society anywhere, which is its youth. We talked a little bit on the other podcast about who gains from something like this, and we can ask those questions as we go forward, and I think it's worth asking those questions. But long term, I think the overall gamesmanship is going to be had by any interest out there, either in the United States or around the world, that seeks to erode the popular discussion and minimize freedom of speech.
You know, I've also said on many Instagram posts just recently, I said this is going to open up a huge vacuum for the left to work psyops and try to fill this vacuum. And I think we can expect, Charlie Kirk was out there speaking about Christianity, the nuclear family. I've never seen anybody like him. He was an anomaly. He was an absolute anomaly. And the energy that he had to carry these discussions and debate one college student after another, time and time again, week after week, month after month, year after year, really showed his perseverance and his dedication. And now he's leaving this void or this vacuum that needs to be filled. And we need to be careful who fills this because Charlie Kirk was an anomaly. There's never going to be another Charlie Kirk. What's going to happen now? What I believe is going to happen now, what I think could happen now is you got to understand how evil works. They infiltrate. They're basically like chameleons. They infiltrate. They use invasion, subversion. They disguise themselves, and I would imagine if we all say this is a spiritual war. A lot of people say at the surface level this is a culture war, but it's a spiritual war at its core. At the surface level, it comes off as a culture war. At its core, it's spiritual. So what would evil do? Well, they would fill that vacuum with a conservative type of personality to lead the youth astray. And that's my point here. Who's going to come in and fill that vacuum and lead the youth astray? I believe there's many candidates for that. I'm not going to say who because it's too early in the game, but it sure seems to me like right now with this vacuum being open, they're going to fill it. Do you agree with me, SG?
Well, I think what you're going to see probably in response to this is a vacuum filling operation from all major political factions, right? And this may end up being something that melds itself into a broader public bridge between ideologies, which is what Mr. Kirk wanted to begin with. But I think the point that you're driving at is that the need for vigilance could not be higher. As we look at what's happening right now and the outfall of the fallout of any major national loss of any kind, you have opportunists that come into the mix. Sometimes they're just driven by greed and self-interest. You have ideologues that come into the mix, oftentimes from the opposing ideology, sometimes from your own ideology. You have individuals who have a interest and a malintent right from the core. Perhaps they're a captured operation by some sort of financial deal that they have in the background. Perhaps they're just zealotous in their own personal life and they want to do harm to the major movement itself. And so they will also seek to rise into the sphere and into the limelight. I think what we have to remember is something that Mr. Kirk talked about at all times, right? Being eternally vigilant about freedom itself, understanding that freedom is a matter of interpreting the world around us and then responding accordingly and being willing, excuse me, to have the discussions about what we're seeing and interpreting and experiencing with one another. That was the core, really, of the message that he brought to many of these campuses that he took Turning Point and a number of other groups to, and accompanied a number of other groups to along in his journeys. And so looking at the vacuum that you described a moment ago as what has been created now as a result of all of this, I think that patriots need to keep in mind that responding in the fashion that the left would seek to ignite and that many of the clowns on that side of the aisle have responded in at this point, that only ensures that the vacuum is filled with something that is antithetical, that is opposite of what Mr. Kirk would have wanted. And so the best way to honor his memory, in my own personal opinion, is to take that vacuum and fill it with genuine, good-hearted American patriots who are now emboldened and not discouraged to speak the truth.
Charlie Kirk leaves behind a beautiful family, two young children that'll never know their father, that the only memory they'll ever have of their father is through pictures. I could see Charlie Kirk, in 2032 or maybe 4 years after that, even running for president. And it almost seems to me like this was a preemptive strike to take him out before he could accomplish his true mission. And he fell short of that. How do you feel about that, SG? Do you feel that maybe Charlie Kirk. I mean, he was in the midst of capturing the hearts and minds of the youth, and he really was the turning point. He really was the turning point, quite literally, of the American youth, and he was making a huge, huge difference in American society and globally. Do you think that he would have ran for president? And do you think, and I know we talked about it on @Nino'sCorner.tv, and we can't go into it too much here because we gave evidence and our perspectives of who we believe is behind this or who could be behind this, who could be behind this. But do you think foreign interests were involved?
Well, I think we have to step back and appreciate that potential angle to the discussion. As if we look at any political assassination or any major national trauma or crisis that has occurred in the Western world and certainly in the United States over the last 3 to 4 decades, I think something we always have to say is cui bono, who benefits from these types of events happening? Who's the benefactor overall of the confusion, of the fallout, and of whatever national and local response is going to come from these things? And so asking that question objectively at this stage in the game, it may be tough for a lot of people. It's certainly difficult for me, even though I'm articulating it here with you. But I think it's worth entertaining, and I think it's a foundational question that we have to approach the issue with. And if we approach the issue with that question in mind, it does not seem to suggest that the left side, the progressive left anyway, is going to benefit long term and be the ultimate benefactor, if you will, of these types of occurrences and of this sequence of events, right? You've not intimidated the We the People Patriot base inside the United States of America. You've only emboldened it. So you had an ideology that was already being marginalized, was already being demonstrated back to them in copious manner that they were the minority as it pertained to overall belief and ideology here in the United States. Quite literally, you have a lot of people on the progressive left. They view themselves as the Spartan 300. So they know themselves to be in the minority, that they're not, representative of the vast majority of the population. And so, and a lot of the smart, what I would say, a lot of the ones on that side of the aisle that are willing to come into the center fold, that are willing to come, out of the trauma program just for a moment and ask a couple of questions, I think they fundamentally understand. I've seen posts online already. They understand that this harms and does not help their ideology. One of the ones I thought was very interesting was from 𝗪𝗂𝗪 from the Young Turks, talking about how this type of stuff only erodes and undermines what they're trying to accomplish. So really, you only have, and obviously MAGA and the Republican side, the conservative base doesn't benefit either. So as when we ask the question, who benefits from something like this? If no one in the U.S. political landscape, except maybe for 5 to 7% of the sycophantics on the very radical left, are going to benefit from something like this, then who benefits in a foreign capacity? And I think when we look around the world, and we're not going to get too deep into it on FluffTube, but when we look around the world, there are several different organizations and entities that would stand to gain from the removal of Mr. Kirk's voice to the broader worldwide Western world public discourse, right? You have globalist interests of many different flavors and having many different puppeteers and different levels of hierarchical structure that would benefit lock, stock, and barrel from the removal of someone like Charlie Kirk, not only from the political landscape down the road, which you referenced a moment ago, but also to destroy and remove his influence with the youth generation that becomes the next generation of leaders around the world. And so I think we have to appreciate and we have to examine that there is a possibility that a foreign actor, either paramilitary and rogue, or perhaps state actor or state-backed actors, that would benefit from something like this. And it seems very odd, the constellation of events that we saw in the immediate fallout of the assassination, that it was just a rogue individual job politically motivated by the radical left here in the United States.
And, the trauma-based programming that they've used is to paralyze a generation, keep them in fear from ever standing up, ever speaking out, ever getting on their soapbox. This now has paralyzed another generation, just like JFK, RFK, MLK, and so on and so forth. And folks, we talk about this more on @Nino'sCorner.tv, and we kind of connect some dots here with the decoys that were set out into the audience that took the blame for the shooting. We talk about the Q meaning the person that was on in the audience asking the question about the mass about mass shooting, the Second Amendment, when Charlie Kirk got shot, almost like it was to set off the shooter. I would apprehend that individual, interrogate that individual. Now, I'm not saying that individual had any affiliation with this, but it's worth questioning that individual. Also, we talk about the plane that turned off its radar and left the airport and came back with the radar. We also talk about the shooter on the roof. We talk about many things on @Nino'sCorner.tv that I don't feel comfortable about talking here. But if you want to go there, folks, it's @Nino'sCorner.tv. SG, is there anything else you want to say?
I think the only thing I would close out with, especially for the audience that's going to receive the broadest view of this particular program and broadcast, is that this is the penultimate moment, if you will, the prime moment for pausing before we respond. We really do have to get a bit of a grip on our own emotions, on our own response mechanisms. It's normal to be upset. It's normal to be angry, confused, frustrated, all of those things, filled with righteous indignation. But we cannot respond effectively when we're in that place. And so that's why the good book talks about the peace that passes all understanding, because you don't really fully grasp it. You don't fully understand it until you find it. And typically you find it in the fallout of something that was very unpleasant, certainly of a traumatic style like what we've seen here. So I would admonish the audience to pray a bit and to center themselves before making any particular moves. And let's honor Mr. Kirk's memory the way that he would have wanted us to do.
Agreed. SG, thank you so much for joining me. Folks, @Nino'sCorner.tv, that's where it's at. All right, SG, thank you.
God bless all.